Yeah. What up? Now what's going on? So
money on getting more customers. A business services that directly help businesses acquire new customers are
style banner settings. Visual effects. No, I didn't want to do that. Not what I wanted to do. That's what I wanted to do.
So for the last 2 weeks, you've probably been watching very carefully what's happening in the conflict with Iran. The United States and Israel are engaged in a joint war against Iran. And all of us are trying to figure out what's happening there. But as our attention is diverted outside of our borders, it's also worth paying attention to what's happening here and in the rest of the West that is not directly connected to this conflict, but still affected by it. And one of the things you notice is that our country, and certainly Europe and Australia, New Zealand and Canada, have all clamped down on their own populations in very unusual, unprecedented ways over the past year, but particularly since this war started 2 weeks ago. And that's a familiar phenomenon. Countries at war tend to become more authoritarian. It always happens. But we should be on guard against it. And one of the ways it is happening in the United States is that free speech is being curtailed. Your inherent God-given right to say what you believe in public. That's the basis of the United States. It's the very core of our Bill of Rights, of our founding documents. It's the reason that we are exceptional in the world. It's that one thing, our ability to say what we think, because that right comes from God, not the government. That's what our documents say. And so of all rights that we should be resistant to losing, that would be at the very top of the list. And yet there is a concerted effort, as our next guest is about to explain, to strip that right from Americans using both the pretext of war and the cover of war. And again, we should be on guard against it. Glenn Greenwald has spent his entire professional life advocating for the freedom of speech, has been punished for it. He has been analyzing carefully what's going on right now. He joins us now. Glenn, thanks a lot for doing this. How would you assess the state of free speech in the West right now?
It is seriously in peril. It's often in peril, but it's more in peril than ever before. And there are a couple of different reasons. Obviously, there's been an attempt on the part of the EU to undermine the ability for people on this populist right to express certain views. And there's been a lot of attention paid to that. But the far more significant threat to free speech, and you and I have been talking about this, Tucker, since all the way back in 2023 after October 7th, is the very concerted effort on the part of the Israeli government. And in each of these democratic countries, they have pro-Israel lobbying groups, not as strong as the United States, but still very strong, that have overtly said that there's too much permissive language under the laws of these countries for what you can say about Israel. And Netanyahu himself, just a couple of months ago, said that we're warning Western states, you better do more to protect the Jews in your country, and you better heed that warning. And ever since, and even, there's been a spate of these kinds of things before that, but ever since, there's been a lot of draconian changes to just obliterating free speech in the name of protecting this foreign country. The most brazen of which was, I don't know if you saw, but the Australians, after Bondi Beach, at the insistence of the Israelis, passed a law banning a whole bunch of common political slogans that offend Israel, like from the river to the sea and things of that nature. And a bunch of Australian citizens were angry that they're not allowed to express this political view any longer, or else they'll be arrested. And they went as kind of civil disobedience wearing a t-shirt that said, "From the river to the sea," and each and every one of them was arrested and processed through the court system. So when you see these sorts of things, these kinds of new speech codes that have been promulgated, including in the United States, a whole bunch of legislative frameworks that really have no purpose other than to expand the definition of anti-Semitism that's existed for decades to include a wide range of common criticisms of Israel or even of Jewish individuals, that is an extremely serious attack on free speech, not in the name of marginalized groups in our own country, but in the name of shielding this foreign country.
The Australia story is so shocking that I didn't think it was real at first. I talked to a friend in Australia who confirmed that it was, but it leaves so many questions. The first of which is, how does a foreign prime minister have the power to tell citizens many thousands of miles away that they're not allowed to criticize him?
Apparently you can go from 0 to a complete site in just a single prompt with Wix Harmony. I don't know if this is going to be possible. Where vibe coding meets drag and drop freedom. We'll see about that. All right, let me try to make a...
I think, if you had asked me this 3 years ago, I would have had to have been delicate because the answer is something a lot of people were unaware of or even thought was taboo. But I think a lot of people understand now that these countries have very strong organizations, activist groups, well-funded lobbies that are not loyal to the interests of ordinary Australians or British people or Canadians or Americans, but instead are coordinating what these laws need to be in the West in order to most effectively and aggressively shield Israel. And Bondi Beach was,
What I want to know, and I'm just super curious to understand, and I have to do some research into it, is how the greatest ally lobby got so powerful in so many countries. It's like their lobby is feared in every Western country, and I don't understand how. I don't understand how they got a stranglehold on the sovereignty of these countries and the sovereignty of our country. I don't understand it.
In fairness, a pretty horrific attack. There was, two gunmen and they, a Hanukkah celebration and gunned down people. But since when in the West do we believe that the solution to massacres or to mass shootings, which happen all the time, is to immediately curb free speech, and not only curb it, but make it illegal to express a whole wide range of views? And it's not just Australia, Tucker. It's happening, and I can, go through every single example, of which there are many over the past 2 years, and especially recently, where very similar things are happening in Canada, in South America, all throughout Europe, and even increasingly in the United States. If I could just give one example, one of the most disturbing things, I think, and it got very little attention, was that when President Trump got into office, he made combating anti-Semitism a major priority across all agencies of his administration. They even have a anti-Semitism czar who's very, very aggressive. And a bunch of regulations got passed saying that if you criticize Israel, you're not eligible for these kinds of programs. And what Israel did about 10 years ago was promulgated this very new, radically expanded hate speech code called the IHRA, which is the International Holocaust Remembrance Act. And it takes very benign and common views about Israel or about Jews, such as Israel is a racist society, or you can compare Israel to the Nazis, or the Jews played a role in killing Jesus, a whole bunch of other kind of criticism of either Israelis or.
Yeah, it's now antiseptic to say that the religion of our greatest ally killed Jesus. It is now literally in the definition of the word antiseptic to say that they killed Jesus. I mean, that's a historical fact. So how are we're controlling history now? We're controlling the Bible? I don't understand. And I don't understand how these people amassed enough power to get away with what they're doing.
Jews or Israel, and they banned it as hate speech, which is, I thought, what the American right was so angry about for so long. And when Trump negotiated, when he withdrew funding from a bunch of colleges on the grounds that they were allowing too much anti-Semitism, every one of the negotiations required them to implement this aggressively expanded definition of anti-Semitism, so that even professors of genocide and Holocaust studies who have been teaching for decades decided that they had to change their reading list because it was now prohibited in the name of Israel. This is America, where the First Amendment is still in place, and yet this is all over our academic institutions.
What if your next computer wasn't a device, but a link?
The First
Welcome to
Amendment
Sense PC,
is-
your computer
is
now
eroding
in the cloud.
very
A
quickly.
powerful cloud.
And they this all happened under the cover of combating wokeness, combating the left-wing death grip on American higher education, which is real. I mean, it's the most real thing of all. But rather than break that grip, it hasn't been broken. It's still in place completely. This was used as like an opportunity to restrict the inherent free speech rights of Americans. And very few people noticed this. I didn't understand it was happening.
Because the problem here is that it's happening in our most elite institutions of higher learning, our universities, our colleges, which, going back to the Enlightenment, everybody agreed was the one place where you needed completely unfettered speech and debate, including offensive ideas, to test things that had been declared taboo, to even, dissect the most sacred orthodoxies. The fact that these speech restrictions are happening on college campuses, I think is extra disturbing and destructive to free speech. And there's also, it's very hard to pinpoint because there's been so many, you mentioned DEI.
And now we will deport anybody here on a student visa who protests the ethnic cleansing of Gaza and the ethnic cleansing that is now going on in Lebanon. I don't understand. I just, it blows my mind how they have such a vice grip around our country and our sovereignty, and I don't know how it gets fixed. And it's pretty scary.
The Trump administration came in promising to dismantle DEI. They did dismantle a lot of so-called DEI programs for Black people, for months recognizing this group or that group. But in many of these agreements, Tucker, with some of the biggest universities, they included classic DEI requirements, but not for Black people, not for women, not for trans or gay people, but for Jews. And there's a lot of these programs that say once a year you have to have an event recognizing the importance of Jewish life on campus. You have to go recruit at Jewish day schools to try and get people who are Jewish to go to the school. You have to create a whole office where people feel offended. And it's a series of rights and agencies available only for Jews. It is classic DEI. So they dismantled DEI for some of the unfavored groups, but created new DEI programs for the ones that are most favored.
Well, and that actually happened? Why did no one on the right say anything about it? Well, I didn't say anything about it. Again, I wasn't aware, and I should have been aware. It's my fault. But I didn't know it was happening.
Nobody on the right said anything about it because the right has been infiltrated by Christian Zionists somehow. And the pastors of these megachurches are using people's faith and relationship with God to manipulate them. And it is the foulest thing I've ever seen.
Why did no one mention it?
I've been mentioning it a lot, and there's, some university or associations very worried about free speech and scholarship that have been active on it. But one of the things that happened is at the beginning of the Trump administration, there was a zillion different initiatives. They really came in prepared, to their credit. And it was just one after the next. And I always felt like one of the most dangerous ones was that they cut off university funding for all of our most important institutions. And this government funding, doesn't go to like trans people in Armenia in the 17th century. The reason our universities get government funding is because that's where the most important advances in technology and in science are developed. That's where the internet came from, was government funding of the internet research at universities. And they cut it all off. And they said, you're not getting it back unless you agree to all of our conditions. And one of the main conditions was the installation of these heightened speech codes, hate speech codes that ban the airing and expression, not just by students, but by faculty of all sorts of ideas. Had nothing to do with the protest. They also forced the firing of Middle East professors and chairs of departments who they deemed to be too friendly to criticism of Israel. It was a remarkable assault on academic freedom at our highest and most well-regarded educational institutions. And it was kind of done, as you said, with very little attention because there was this flurry of other stuff going on at the beginning of the Trump administration. But if you go back and look at what those agreements were, or what the DEI clauses are, or what that IHRA hate speech code is, you will be shocked at the kinds of ideas that are no longer permitted to be expressed in classes, by faculty, in reading, in student debates, upon pain of being expelled or suspended or fired.
And a lot of people hesitate before getting traditional therapies for cholesterol health.
It's crazy that we dismantled the entire DEI system and replaced it with a whole new system of censorship and favoritism, and it's all in favor of the pro-Zionist cause. And if you speak out against it, you are not a true American, you're not a true patriot, you are anti-Semitic, you're a J hater. And none of those things are true. None of those things are true. But they will manipulate things to make it seem like that.
Of neocon politics are now doing with Muslims. Hate all the Muslims. I don't like that any more than I like hate all the Jews. But I wonder, was there massive harassment of Jewish students in the Ivy League? Are Jewish students underrepresented at Ivy League schools? Was there evidence that they were systematically discriminated against?
Content creation is easy because I use ClickUp.
Sorry,
Here's how
I'm
I
a
keep
cheap
my
fuck.
content creation process running smoothly.
I don't pay for you.
I use ClickUp AI to bring
The ADL about a year ago issued this statement complaining that Hollywood had adopted all these diversity rules for how many actors you have to have and directors and whatever. And they complained that Jewish people were not among the minority groups that were part of the diversity count. And they basically argued, not just implicitly, but explicitly, that Hollywood has long been known for discriminating against or creating barriers for the participation of Jews in.
That's got to be a joke, right? The head of all of these all of these big studios, the news networks, they're all of that religion. Like, this is a joke. Like, we're being manipulated every way possible, and our politicians just allow it.
Various power sectors in Hollywood, which I think would come as a gigantic surprise to anybody who has ever had any remote familiarity with Hollywood. And the same is true at educational institutions. Go and look who the last 7 of 8 Harvard professors were. They were all Jewish. John Mearsheimer talked about this. You know, he's been in academia for 50 years, and he said, I keep hearing that there's this like problem with not enough Jews or Jews being attacked. I've been in academia for 50 years. The idea that Jews are underrepresented is so insultingly false, but the attempt to turn these educational institutions into somehow bastions of anti-Semitism, even though they're filled with Jews at every crucial level, including donors and administrators and professors and students, you know, you always need a reason to censor. You always have to cite some sort of crisis. But I think the key thing here, Tucker, is that even if you believe those protests were anti-Semitic and harassing Jews, and it was wildly exaggerated for so many reasons, we don't need to get into that. But these speech codes I'm talking about that Trump forced the universities to adopt, our IHRA hate speech codes, they have nothing to do with protests. They're not about conduct. They're solely about ideas. And I mean, I could just give you a couple. You're not allowed to say that the existence of the state of Israel is a racist endeavor. You're allowed to say the United States is a racist endeavor. You can say that about China or Japan or Iran, Norway, Indonesia, any other country on the planet. In our schools, you're not allowed to say it's a racist endeavor. You're not allowed to claim that Jews participated in the killing of Jesus. You can't draw comparisons between Israeli policy today and that of the Nazis. You can compare American wars to Nazis, any other country. It's all special protections of the kinds that we told we were.
I don't understand how we're not allowed to say that the Jews killed Jesus. Like, that is a historical fact that they are the ones that put him on the cross. And they are the ones that crucified him. So why are we not allowed to talk about it? Why am I not allowed to talk about my faith?
Going to be done by. And there are so many more of these that are amazing, that are just so obviously protected speech, but no longer safely expressed in the college or university setting.
But it leaves America, just like this war, it leaves America unprotected. So, I mean, not that these are protections, and I would never, of course, support a law banning criticism of the country that I own, America. We all own this country as citizens. So I would never support those, but it's just interesting that there's no criticism of the United States, our country, that is banned or even discouraged, only of a foreign country. Is that correct?
There are no bans on your ability to criticize the American government, American wars, the American founding, and that's what's remarkable. I was obviously vehemently opposed to the kind of tsunami of left-wing censorship that happened in our elite university. I was on your show many times to talk about why that was so dangerous. And I don't want to in any way justify it, but what I will say is, at the very least, the ostensible pretextual argument for why we needed censorship, like anti-Black speech or anti-trans speech, whatever, is because we were protecting marginalized American citizens who belonged to groups that were endangered. Totally false, totally dangerous. But at least they were trying to ostensibly protect American citizens in the United States. What's so remarkable about these new codes is they're only to protect Israel. Like, imagine you go in and you're a citizen of Australia and you wear a shirt criticizing or advocating for something with Israel and you get arrested in your own democratic country of Australia. It is bizarre, Tucker. There's no other laws that would be applicable to any other countries. It's only for this one country over and over and over.
What if instead of designing thumbnails, you could just paste your YouTube link into our AI and it would create scroll-stopping thumbnails?
And it also sends a very unsettling message because censorship, is always levied on behalf of the people in charge. Of course, the people with the power are the only ones who ever pass laws telling you can't criticize them. I mean, of course. And so what does this tell? I mean, what is this? It's spooky. I've never been the guy who runs around saying Israel runs the United States. It's an overstatement, but I certainly don't want to think that. But like, if you can't criticize a foreign country, then that country's in charge, right? I mean, what other conclusion should I draw?
I can't really provide you with the cogent one. I will say, I think, and it doesn't in any way justify or change anything you said, but I nonetheless think it's important to note that I think one of the reasons this is happening, and Mearsheimer and Wald, who wrote that the Israel Lobby book back in 2007, the pioneering first ever real book about the influence of the Israel Lobby, they've recently talked about how, especially Mearsheimer, how back, over the last several decades, it was very important for the Israel Lobby to act kind of in the shadows. I don't mean that nefarious. I mean, they just didn't want it obvious that there was this, force that like most lobbyist groups operate in the sewers and shadows of the Capitol. But over the last 3 years, the pro-Israel lobby has had to come out into the open so much more than ever before and really just be so explicit in calling everyone anti-Semitism, advocating for speech restrictions. And the reason is because there has been a very radical and, from an Israeli perspective, an extremely alarming collapse in support for Israel among Americans in basically every demographic group other than conservatives over 50. So basically like decades-long Fox watchers. But
I don't understand. They want to blame us for the collapse in support of Israel when they have been wiping Gaza off the map. Now they've moved into Lebanon and they are wiping Lebanon off the map. We are sending our sons and daughters to die protecting and trying to open the Strait of Hormuz to get oil through. But collapse for their cause is happening, and it's our fault because we don't want to send our sons and daughters to die for your war, for your benefit, because where is the benefit for the American people? Where is the benefit for the family struggling to put food on the table? The only thing we're doing by supporting this is raising the prices of gas, energy, food, the price of everything. That's all we're doing, is making it harder for the average American to survive by supporting all of this bullshit.
But even conservatives under 50 have all basically now have majority opinions that are disfavorable to Israel. And you see some of what they've been trying to do in response. Larry Ellison tried to buy TikTok, which was one of the perceived sources where so many people were hearing about anti-Israel criticism. So they pried it out of the hands of the owners and put it into Larry Ellison's hand. You see the Ellison family buying CBS and News and putting Barry Weiss there. There's an IDF soldier at TikTok. So these are all desperate moves. And I think the same is true with this very brazen attempt that they wouldn't have done before. So out in the open, try and censor American speech for Israel. But it's because they feel panic. They're in panic. It's kind of a desperation. That spiral of support for Israel among Americans, which had been utterly unthreatened for decades, is very rapid, and I don't think it's ever going back. And I think a lot of these efforts, as kind of, you know, just obvious and with such a high potential for backlash, are being pursued anyway because they're just desperate about trying to find some way to reverse that public opinion trend in the United States.
They're never
Inflation
going
makes
to
credit
be
card
able to-
statements particularly scary. You work 40, 50 hours a week just to buy groceries.
They are never going to be able to reverse the damage that has been done to the reputation and how the younger generation views their government, their country, their agenda. It'll never be the same. My youngest brother is 25, I want to say. I think he's 25. His whole generation, none of them, either side of the aisle, supports anything that's going on over there. And when these youngins get into power, there is going to be a major referendum on the support that our government and our country provides to Israel. It's coming. As soon as these boomers and crazy Zionists get out of office and start getting primaried and start retiring, the younger generation is going to get in, and it is not going to be good for the greater Israel agenda, because nobody under the age of 30 supports any of it. And it is what it is, man. Like, they have done it to themselves. If you call somebody a racist enough times, eventually they're just gonna be like, fuck it, I'm a racist. And the same thing is happening now. You call somebody antiseptic enough times, and they're gonna be like, you know what? You're right. I'm antiseptic. Now what are you gonna do? And that's what's happening. And people don't care. And it is I feel bad for people of the Jewish faith that don't support this, because they are going to be the ones that are caught in the crossfire and don't deserve to be, but guilty by association, and that's what happens. And all they're doing is just creating a angry mob of people that are not supportive of anything that they do.
It's having the opposite effect, of course. So maybe, and it's, I mean, really having the opposite effect. It's changing people's minds against Israel. Israel is doing that. And so you have to wonder, like, maybe that is the goal.
If you work a corporate job, you're probably wondering if AI is going to replace you in the next 5 to 10 years. You're right.
We saw the exact same thing many times, but most recently with the left, and, you know, in the wake of George Floyd and Me Too, they just started kind of frantically accusing everybody of being a racist and a white supremacist and a misogynist. And people got really, that was peak woke, and people got really tired of it. And so many people were being accused that at some point it just lost its meaning, and people got angry about it. Nobody appreciates those who are trying to stifle debate. And there was a huge backlash
Exactly.
in terms of people no longer caring about being called racist because they drained it of all its meaning. Exactly the same thing is so clearly happening here. And of course, there's going to be a lot of resentment the more people see how much of a speech crackdown in the West generally, in the United States in particular, there is in defense of this foreign country. But again, I would just go back to the fact that it was really the obliteration of Gaza, all the inhumane atrocities that we saw that accompanied it, that we saw literally every day, that we realized the United States was paying for under Joe Biden and arming and funding. It really radically transformed how people think of their own government and how they think of Israel. And I just think that this is all an effort to put the cat in the bag, because there's always been a perception that Israel's existence depends on widespread support in the United States, and that is crumbling.
I hesitate even to say this because it pains me so much, but we've been doing shows together for a long, 10 years. And the basis of most of them has been, free speech. It's the most American idea there is, and it's the one worth dying for. And we both have always agreed on that. And you're a lifelong figure on the left. I'm a lifelong figure on the right. And we both agreed that the left was the real threat to free speech, because it was. Over the last year, the right seems every bit as the right, whatever that means, like the Republican Party, I guess, seems every bit as threatening to free speech, maybe even more so, maybe more effective.
And that is a big question right now, is what does it mean to be a Republican? Because I could tell you what, I was MAGA. I was with Make America Great Again. But when Make America Great Again became Make Israel Great Again, and none of the policy changes that were promised during the campaign have come to fruition, the only thing we've done is made things worse. I don't want to be a part of MAGA, because it does not seem like the MAGA coalition has the best interests of the average American in their hearts. It seems like they are all Zionists, and that is their goal. And it's a shame, man. I feel like I got played and lied to and gaslit and manipulated, and I'm pissed. And a lot of us are pissed. And we have every right to be.
In this attack on free speech than the left. I really don't want to think that. It pains me to admit it, but I want to be honest, and I'm starting to believe that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's because the left suddenly had an awakening about the importance and virtues of free speech and the need to protect it. It's really because they're out of power. And the right is in power. And that, of course, is something very common when people claim to believe in certain liberties and certain civil rights, and they get into office and suddenly they find reasons to unravel it. But this has been going on for a while. I think, you mentioned how the hate speech codes at universities didn't get a lot of attention. Another thing that never got a lot of attention, and it drives me very crazy to this day because it's so preposterous, and it really predates October 7th. I would say it's now up to 35 or 36 states in the United States, the vast majority of which are red states, but not all, that have enacted laws that make it a requirement, if you want a government contract, that you certify that you do not support a boycott of Israel. And a lot of people who had contracts before this law was passed ended up getting fired because they refused. There have been hurricane relief aid that cities have conditioned on signing a form that says you don't support a boycott of Israel. There have been all kinds of firings in universities for people who criticize Israel. So it's been developing for quite a while. It's not like it just started.
Hurricane relief was predicated on a signed statement that you don't support a boycott for Israel. In other words, you don't even have to be actively boycotting Israel, but if you conceptually support it, you can't get hurricane relief, emergency disaster aid. Is that true?
First of all, this is the kind of thing that I know people don't believe unless they go
I mean,
look
that's
it
like,
up. You know, it's so shocking. I know. If I didn't see it myself, I also wouldn't believe it. I think if I heard that, I'd be like, that's a conspiracy theorist saying crazy stuff.
If you were actively boycotting Jewish or Israeli businesses or whatever, FEMA would not give you emergency relief funding. Like, what? I don't like. I don't even have the words for to explain how twisted that makes me.
No, that actually is something that was instituted in many places. Different kinds of language, but mostly it requires that you certify that you don't participate in a boycott of Israel, in order to get, a state contract, or in order to get hurricane relief. There were HHS regulations once RFK took over that were forced on by the administration that said,
Welcome to the next generation of website creation. Wix Harmony. Get the power.
Certain grants you can't get unless you certify that you're not supporting a boycott of Israel. I'm talking about grants for research that would help Americans' health that would then got conditioned on this sort of thing. So this has been something that has been going on for a while. Let me just say one other thing, Tucker. One of the people who supported that ban on people getting state contracts unless they certify they won't support a boycott of Israel was Andrew Cuomo when he was governor of New York. When he was governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo ordered the state to boycott the state of North Carolina and the state of Indiana over anger because of their bathroom bills, their trans bathroom bills.
I remember that.
So Cuomo ordered a boycott of American states. Once these laws started proliferating, Andrew Cuomo embraced this and said, if you boycott Israel, New York State will boycott you, meaning we won't do business with you. This is someone who said it's totally fine to boycott your fellow countrymen, your states in the United States. That's not only is it fine, I'm ordering those boycotts. The one thing you can boycott any other country on the planet as well, any other state, any other city, you just can't boycott Israel. So many American laws in place that impose draconian deprivations in the event that you're not able to certify that truthfully.
It's beyond belief that there not only states that did this, the majority of states by your telling, but that there's been no protest against it. I mean, because of course there's no ban on boycotting the United States. I mean, our country doesn't play a role in any of this. It's like a foreign country of 9 million people. Their interests determine whether you get hurricane relief or a federal contract. Like, why has no one protested this?
It's just, for a long time before October 7th, especially, there was just kind of Israel was sort of on the back burner, but also, you know this very well, there was a taboo. There was a high career and reputational cost if you were going to talk about Israel and anything other than the reverent, bipartisan script that we always have to finance and arm and support Israel and go to war for Israel. If you deviated at all, a lot of people, paid a big price for that. So I think there was just always, I've been writing about Israel and this sort of stuff and its influence in the United States for 20 years. And there are many times when I saw things that I just couldn't believe were real, and they were real. And as you say, they got very little attention because there was a climate that convinced people implicitly or otherwise, you're better off just not talking about Israel. There's a million other things you can go talk about. Leave the Israel topic alone. And a lot of people did it. And after October 7th, it just became unsustainable.
I mean, and I think after this war, it will become unsustainable. I don't think that any of this can remain unchallenged, and some of it will be overturned. And actually, let me just take a quick side detour here and ask you, this war is not popular. I just want to say on the record, I'm hoping for the best resolution for the United States, because this is my country. But it's not popular, and it hasn't been from the very first day. In fact, the majority of Americans are against it. But
You guys know what that means, right? The majority of Americans are against it. That means it is false flag season. 100%. They need a way to get American support for the war. They need a way to gain support for what our greatest ally is doing. And the only way that will happen is if American blood is spilt here in America. It's the only way. It's the only way that this administration can get out of this PR nightmare. They have put themselves in a no-win position, and it's the only thing that they could do at this point.
there have been no protests, no meaningful protests against it. What is that?
One of the problems is that there's a constitutional framework that was created by the founders that everyone can go read the Constitution. Article 1 says that Congress has the exclusive right to declare war, and not just to declare war, but other aspects of how those wars are conducted. And there was a reason for it. If you go read the Federalist Papers, if you go read a bunch of other stuff that was written about it at the time, the reason is because wars are the singular most potentially dangerous thing, the worst thing, the most destructive thing that a country can embark upon. And the people who end up having their lives risked for it are the citizens of the country fighting the war. At least that used to be true. That's no longer true, but it was true back then. And the theory was, if you're going to start a war, you have to have the consent of the people who are going to actually be fighting in the war or paying for the war or otherwise burdening themselves. And the way to do that is you have the people, the branch that's closest to the American people is the Congress, because they're elected every 2 years. And that was why it was so important to approve those wars. We've completely gotten away from that. Presidents believe in both parties they can start wars, and they frequently do without any kind of attempt to gain congressional approval. Obama started the war in Libya with no congressional approval. A couple days later, the House actually voted on whether to authorize it. The House voted no, we're not authorizing it. And Obama just went ahead and did it anyway. So we've lost this idea that we're supposed to have a debate, that it's in the hands of anybody other than the president. I think beyond that, though, traditionally, people have gotten really angry about wars, have started protesting wars when there's a lot of Americans, well, deployed in Vietnam by a draft. But even, in Iraq, when there's a lot of troops coming home in body bags or dying. And I think the idea is, if we're just air bombing, if that's all we're doing, it just doesn't provide the impetus for Americans to go out and protest. And also, the big difference between the Iraq War and the Iran War, for all the valid criticisms of Bush and Cheney and Condoleezza Rice and that whole crew.
You know why Americans aren't protesting right now? It's because Americans have lost hope that they can change any of this. That's why Americans aren't protesting right now. Because even if you had 1 million people protesting in Washington, these politicians are still going to do what the fuck they're going to do. And our protests won't mean shit. Also because when the right protests, we don't burn down our cities. We don't loot the Walmart. We don't break into shopping malls. That's not how we protest. but nothing that we say or nothing that we do, I don't think there would be a big enough protest that would make any difference. Because as long as these politicians are getting rich, that's all they care about.
At least they had a nationwide campaign for more than a year to convince Americans that they should support the war and laying out the case. It was filled with lies and falsehoods and all kinds of wrong and ignorant predictions, but at least they did it. This war was just like, here it is. And there was no public debate, meaningful debate about whether we should have a second war. It wasn't part of the 2024 campaign. So I think it just happened so quickly. There was never really any consistent rationale or motive as to what we were doing or what the goals were. And I just don't think that gave Americans the fuel to protest. I think you will see that if this gets further out of control.
Making how-to videos used to take me hours. I'd record, mess up, start over, and edit.
The gold industry bankrolls a lot of concern.
And they tend.
In the modern age, though, protests are organized, and they're organized over social media or by text message, and they're organized by groups with a stake in, politically, whatever the outcome of the debate is. So, the Iraq War protests were organized by groups, and the George Floyd protests were organized by groups that we could identify and paid for by companies whose names we know. It's like it wasn't just random Americans showing up on the National Mall to express their opinions. They were bussed in, and I'm not criticizing that at all. But that's not happening now. So it's not just that Americans aren't engaged, like they're opposed to it, but there's no group on the left that seems interested in making a big deal out of this. I just find that so weird.
Well, I think the other problem with it is that although there are a lot of Democrats posturing as being opposed, when they go on like MSNBC or whatever, there's no real effort on the part of the Democrats in Congress to take any steps that would actually impede the war. I mean, there was a vote about whether they needed authorization and they lost that vote. But the reality is that the Democratic leadership, Chuck Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, they support this war, especially Chuck Schumer. They have no interest in doing anything like having votes on funding because they don't think it's politically wise. And when you have no leadership from the Democratic Party, which is supposed to be the opposition party, I think that also contributes to a reason why there's not a lot of nationwide protests. You need leaders to do it. But again, I think the big issue was it just came out of nowhere. It wasn't like the Iraq War or other wars where you had time to protest. You just woke up one day and there was a Truth Social post from Trump in the middle of the night announcing the war, and then there was the war.
Yeah. No, that's a really good point. And so like so many of these changes, it was unheralded. It just happened. So just back to the speech question. I know there was a not famous enough moment where the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, who's I think been a pretty good governor in some ways, but traveled to Israel to sign what looked like hate speech laws that are applicable in Florida. Is that a mischaracterization? Some of his supporters denied that it actually happened. Did it actually happen? And what does it mean?
It did actually happen. He actually went to Israel twice to sign laws in Israel that applied to people in Florida. The first one was kind of benign and had some connection to Israel. The second one, though, which was in, I believe, 2022, when he was gearing up to run for the Republican primary nomination, a big part of what the strategy was they were going to get, and they did get, most of the hardcore fanatical Zionist groups and pro-Israel activist types and pundit types. They lined up not behind Trump, up behind Ron DeSantis. And that was very much a part of his strategy, was currying favor with this crowd, which, okay, that's, what people do in politics. To go to, and I don't want to completely mischaracterize the law because there is some, you can overstate it, but it absolutely was a law that took certain speech and prescribed it, not for the people in Israel, but for the people in Florida. And it was about funding hate speech programs. And again, only about anti-Semitism in Israel and he went to Israel in order to sign it. That was just true. I don't understand that either. That was not something that provoked a lot of outrage. Why is he signing bills for the people in Florida in Israel when it actually can have the effect of confining or restricting the speech of the people in Florida in relation to Israel? It seems like he was siding with this foreign country over the citizens of the state that elected him.
It's, if nothing else, it's so humiliating. It's so obviously humiliating. I mean, I'm going to a foreign country to sign a law, any law that affects you in my state. I mean, what, I mean, I'm just trying to understand the psychology here. I mean, again, like a lot of the things you've just mentioned, I didn't really believe that could actually have happened. So I wasn't as focused on it when it did happen. I should have been.
Oh, it happened.
My mistake. But I'm wondering the thinking of like the Israeli government officials who pushed this. There were some. How did they think that helped them? Didn't they think that would engender resentment? How could it not engender resentment?
I mean, did it though? Because, again, I think that there wasn't that much attention paid. How many people really know that Ron DeSantis did it? Every time I mention it, people who don't know are shocked and angry for obvious reasons. But if this were something that were done in isolation, you could create some kind of rationale. Again.
Yeah, for sure.
Ron DeSantis was trying to be a pro-Israel, candidate, going there kind of does that. There's a lot of money there. You have Miriam Adelson. It can be a campaign strategy. But the problem is that I can point you to every institution, laws, and hate speech codes. Do you know how many people got fired after October 7th for expressing criticism of Israel or dissenting from the narrative about Israel? Bill Ackman assembled blacklists for students who signed a petition blaming Israel for the conflict in general. This was a huge crackdown on speech after October 7th. People in media and journalism and art and everywhere got fired, including in academia, for the crime of expressing views about Israel that were deemed off limits. And it is pervading our country. You can see it in every sector all the time. I mean, I chronicle it all the time. So it's like most of them aren't available off the top of my head because there's so many.
It's where does this go? Like, 'cause this is totally incompatible with our founding documents, with the history of the United States, and with American culture itself. It's too much. And so it either becomes much, much worse or it goes away. I don't think we can stay.
That winning feeling you love? Bring it everywhere you go with the Hollywood Casino app. Your next big thrill?
Where we are. That's my instinct. What's yours?
Well, I'm Jewish. So when people talk about anti-Semitism and the crisis of anti-Semitism, that is something that I don't dismiss lightly. Like, anti-Semitism is real.
Agree.
It's been dangerous in history, like anti-Black racism, lots of other things. And for a long time, there was this kind of victimhood mentality after October 7th that Jews were uniquely endangered in the United States that I found very unpersuasive, to put it generously. But I do now think that when you have all these people who are loyal to Israel buying up our media and putting IDF soldiers in charge of TikTok censorship, and Barry Weiss here at CBS News to kind of control the moderation. And on top of that, you have this war now that was for Israel, or at least in large part, Israel played a very big role. I mean, even government officials mentioned that. Obviously, it was Israel's main adversary. There's no denying that. That's when I really start to think that the more they try and spew this anti-Semitism accusation at everybody, the more they get more desperate, as we were talking about before, and interfere in our American politics to try and, have lockdowns and crackdowns on our speech. The more Ted Cruz and Lindsey Graham and all these politicians constantly are talking about how often they're in Israel and saying that their main, issue when they ran for Congress was defending Israel. I do think that has a very high potential of producing anti-Semitism, because at some point people are going to be asking, what is going on here? Why is there so much external influence on behalf of this foreign country, and who's doing it? That is something that worries me.
Well, I think I think all of us have every reason to be worried, and it's absolutely producing actual anti-Semitism. I see it every single day when I go on the internet, which I try not to do too much, but you can't avoid it. And it's real too. It's not just like, I don't like what Israel's doing, AIPAC is bad, which I vehemently agree with. It's like Jews are bad. And it's not clear to me exactly where all of it's coming from. I think some of it's inorganic, clearly. These are basically ideological false flags. But I do think some of it is organic. I think some of it is absolutely real. And I hate to agree with the ADL, but on this specific point, is anti-Semitism rising in the United States? Oh, no doubt. And it's bad. It's totally bad. So that kind of gets to my deeper concern, which is not about Jews specifically. It's about all Americans. I feel like ethnic conflict is being encouraged in this country.
Yes. I mean, we have had ethnic conflict before, and part of what I hated so much about the left-wing ideology and the way to express itself over the last decade was the fact that it just seems so maliciously designed to divide people based on these very primal, crude demographic groups, and to separate them and tell them to all go into their corners and to blame the others, which is incredibly volatile and dangerous to do. And I think that, if you
guys, do me a favor. If you're in here, drop a like, please, and a comment. Something. I'm getting shadow banned like crazy. And I could really use the help to get myself out there. So a like, a comment, a share, anything goes a really long way, and I would really appreciate it.
if you turn on, I don't know how often you do this, but there's this whole, like, as you get older, there's like these different sectors of media and entertainment that you know nothing about because it's not for you. But I try and make an effort to pay attention to them. There's all these like huge celebrities, but because you're over 30, you have no idea who it is.
Right. Oh yes, I'm familiar.
But they're super famous, and you're like, who's that? But I try hard, especially when it comes to political stuff, to pay attention to like big streamers and that whole culture where Gen Z does politics. And you will be shocked if you go and listen to it or watch it for any amount of time, how common, how overwhelming anti-Israel sentiment is in a very aggressive way, and how often it does kind of morph into, sometimes ironically, sometimes transgressively, but it's very linked to how people feel about Jews. And let me just say one quick thing on this, Tucker, because this is such an important point that is hard to express like on social media or whatever. One of the, in that IHRA hate speech definition that Israel promulgated, it ended up in the criminal law in the EU, it's now in Australia, it's on our campuses. One of the things that bans is conflating Jews and Israel, meaning if Israel does something bad, you're not allowed to say, oh, this was done by Jews, because that is a conflation that is considered anti-Semitic because you're blaming a bunch of Jews who had nothing to do with Israel for what you're criticizing.
Right.
Yet, look how often the people who are on the other side of that debate, who love Israel, who constantly say they worry about anti-Semitism, they conflate Israel and Jews all the time. And I think this is the problem. So if you say, Israel killed, 10,000 children, they'll immediately say, oh, look, blood libel. He's accusing Jews of killing, 10,000 people or having, raped soldiers. And no, you didn't accuse Jews, you accused Israel. But when they conflate it in order to place criticism of Israel off limits to make it seem like you're attacking Jews, even though you're not, that too is a very dangerous conflation that they themselves are promoting. So that when people now think about Israel in their minds, because they're constantly hearing it, that means Jews. So if they're angry at Israel, if they think Israel did something disgusting, if they don't want the U.S. funding Israel or Israel interfering, that quickly becomes Jews. And it's their fault, the fault of the people who are Israel supporters in managing this discourse.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's the original sin here. I think it's very short-sighted and dangerous. If there were a self-identified Christian nation that was just for Christians, there isn't one, but if there was, I'd be like, yeah, go Christian country, I'm Christian. And then if that country started behaving in ways that were brutal and outrageous and deceptive and started killing people because of their bloodline, really behaving in ways that were impossible to defend, and they started filling my airwaves with propaganda about how every Christian has to be loyal to this country, doing things that are nauseating to me, I would feel, first of all, I'd be outraged by that. Don't do that in my name would be number one. And number two, I would feel threatened. I would feel physically endangered by that. Why are you tying me to this? I've got nothing to do with this. I mean, I would, I think.
Well, and that was very much what happened, after September 11th. There was this huge danger that because some Islamic groups or Islamic countries had
Right.
participated in this horrific attack, that all Muslims were going to be blamed. And so many Muslims had all sorts of different views. You're talking about hundreds of millions of them, or a billion. And
Hello, my name is Adam Ferrari, and I'm the CEO of Phoenix Energy. I look forward to you joining us at our
one of the things George W. Bush did, to his credit, was work very hard from the start to say, no, we're not at war with Islam. This isn't Islam that did this. This is this distorted version of.
Oh no, didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
Like groups or Islamic countries had participated in this horrific attack, that all Muslims were going to be blamed. And so many Muslims had all sorts of different views. You're talking about hundreds of millions of them, or a billion. And one of the things George W. Bush did, to his credit, was work very hard from the start to say, no, we're not at war with Islam. This isn't Islam that did this. This is this distorted version of Islam. And that, I think, is exactly what we're seeing now. Is it's such an important rhetorical tool to say Israel is the state of the Jews. Oh, look, Tucker Carlson said this horrible thing, even though you said it about Israel, about the Jews. And this constant conflation, for the reasons you just said, is exactly what, if you're in that group being tied up to this nation state, you should fear more than anything and combat as passionately as you can.
I mean, you must feel that. Well, I guess you're maybe in a separate category because you are Jewish, but you've had the same views for your entire professional life, and you've been very vocal about it. But I mean, this must be a real concern for a lot of people who aren't against Israel, but are not on board with the Netanyahu government, and they're somehow tied to this against their will. Like, ugh.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to have this foreign country, and this is what I was getting at before, exerting massive amounts of influence inside another country, you better make sure that you're doing it in a way that's very subtle, that's barely visible.
Great.
And that they were always doing that. And that's why they were so angry at Mearsheimer and Wald's book. You go back, and if you don't remember, look at just the absolute attacks on them. People lost their minds about that book because it dragged into the light something that was always supposed to be secret. The problem now is it's not secret. The desperation and panic have made them have to come out into the light and be very open about what they're doing, and people see it. And if you're going to just sit there and be very visible and vocal and all over the place about how we have to change our laws, or, restrict speech and everything else, fire people to defend this foreign country or protect this foreign country, the outcome is going to be very predictable. And I think you're seeing a lot of that.
So just back to the previous question, because you don't just cover principles and ideas, but politics, and have for a long time. Where do you think this goes politically? Like, what does the country look like? We've got midterms this fall. 2 years from then, we have a presidential election. Clearly, there's going to be a realignment. The neocons have intentionally blown up the Trump coalition. They hated it from day one because it was, quote, America first, which obviously precludes putting Israel first. So they wanted to destroy the coalition. They have. Where do things land, given those facts?
You're already seeing this major transformation, actually well on its way, if not coming soon to its conclusion, in the Democratic Party, where it's becoming almost untenable for candidates in the Democratic Party, including incumbents, to run, especially in primaries, if they're too supportive of Israel, if they accept AIPAC money. This transformation is close to complete. That is not going to be reversed. And what made the Israel lobby so powerful for so long was that it was, more than anything else, bipartisan, unfailingly bipartisan. It wasn't one party or the other. Netanyahu kind of destroyed that, but there was still a lot of pro-Israel support in the Democratic Party. That's gone. And I think if I were Israel, and I were, Israel firster in the United States, primarily concerned with the standing of that country in the United States.
If you're an Israel firster in the United States, you should go back to fucking Israel. That's where you should go. You should go back to Israel and not come back. And stop taking our tax dollars to give Israelis free healthcare, free schooling, and all this other shit while our country is falling the fuck apart. While we're sending our sons, our daughters, our friends, our children off to die for their fucking war. That's what needs to happen. We shouldn't allow dual citizenship to. We shouldn't allow politicians to have dual citizenship. If you have dual citizenship, you shouldn't be a politician in the United States. Your loyalty should be to the American people and the American people only. Period. That's it. I think we have 2 politicians that are loyal to the American people. And one of them quit politics so fast. She was here and then she was gone. Like, Marjorie Taylor Greene got out so fast that I don't think anybody really knows what the fuck happened. And she was one of the biggest voices that we had, and she was one of the biggest Trump supporters that was there, that was with him the entire time. And then he decides to turn his back on her and call her Crazy Margie. It's fucking bullshit, man. It's bullshit.
The thing that would alarm me the most is that this is now happening on the right. I can't imagine a 2028 primary campaign in the Republican Party that does not prominently feature this question. And I also can't imagine that there's not going to be somebody like a major candidate who's not purposely occupying that lane of saying, we were told that we weren't going to have any more foreign wars or foreign attachments. One of the major problems is Israel. We don't hate Israel. We don't have anything against it. We just need to stop being responsible for funding it and fighting wars for it. And I think that's going to have a lot of appeal. So it's always going to take the DC establishment very long. I don't know if Susan Collins is like walking around. She promised she was going to only serve 2 terms. I think she's getting like
The problem is that when AIPAC supports a candidate, they get elected 98 to 100% of the time. So for that to happen, AIPAC needs to register as a foreign lobby. They can't have these cutouts for AIPAC.
Her 7th, and somebody went up to her and said, what about all these dead people in Gaza that you paid for? And she kind of like just stumbled into her car, very dazed because of her age. And she just like uttered this cliche, I'm pro-Israel. And so you have this like older establishment generation that's never going to change. It's programmed in their brain. But you see the trend so clearly, not just in the Democratic Party, but in the Republican Party, where this issue is transforming and not slowly, but rapidly.
Well, this is why the neocons so hated Charlie Kirk, because he saw this happening. And I remember you and I did an interview at my house this summer, and you explained a lot of your views on this topic, on Israel, and were immediately, they leaked a tape to try to embarrass you. And one of the very first people to defend you in a heartfelt way was Charlie Kirk. And I was actually made me emotional watching it, because it was just so principled. And it was so not what you expect. And he did it at actual personal cost to do this, but he really meant it, because he could see that you and he, while you have differences, were basically seeing the same picture of the future of America, which is like, let's help the country. And they hated that.
The reason Charlie Kirk is no longer with us is because of what's going on right now in the Middle East. Because Charlie had the hearts and the minds of the youth in this country, and he was completely opposed to what is going on right now. And they needed to shut him up, or it would have caused major problems for them. Not that they don't have a PR nightmare that's uncontrollable as it is, but he would have made the PR nightmare an organized and cohesive movement. And that's something that is completely lacking right now. We don't have an organized and cohesive movement against what's going on. You have a bunch of people like me yelling on the internet, but Charlie being involved with all the college campuses and doing all these change my minds, Charlie was out there. Charlie was the general, and the soldiers would have followed. And until the America First movement has a new general, it's like we're swimming around in the abyss. And somebody needs to have the balls to step up and say enough is enough.
Never forget that as long as I live.
I tried a ton of AI work tools. Then I tried Monday.com. Game over. Monday.
Yeah, I mean, Charlie and I have had a lot. Charlie was a super interesting,
yes,
independent, subtle thinker. And I know everybody on the left, if you say anything good about Charlie Kirk, they're immediately going to get enraged. I don't really care at all. I think we are missing, like, not just emotionally, but very substantively and in a very compelling way, the presence of Charlie Kirk when it comes to this war and related issues. And,
100%.
he was very supportive of the Snowden reporting and free speech. We had a lot of that in common, but also this question, and I talked to him as he was evolving. And, one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen, Tucker, was, for a long time, Charlie Kirk was very pro-Israel. And he obviously started questioning that in all sorts of ways, to the point that he was refusing to deplatform you, even if it meant the loss of donors that in the millions of dollars who didn't want anybody questioning Israel or criticizing Israel on the stage. And he went out in interviews, including on his own show, and a big one with Megyn Kelly, where they both said, what is going on here? Like, we need to start questioning this, but they try and make it so that you can't, because you'll have your reputation destroyed, because they will call you anti-Semites. And one of the things Megyn said that I really think was observant and perceptive was that Charlie represented younger conservatives, 18 to 32 or whatever the age group was. And overwhelmingly, they are turned against Israel. And he couldn't just be this hardcore fanatical pro-Israel champion. He had to acknowledge that the debate was opening and had to open that debate. And when he did, he himself started not abandoning Israel, not becoming anti-Israel at all, but clearly being skeptical of U.S. support for it. And I will never forget that within seconds or minutes after he died, Benjamin Netanyahu was all over American media for, that day, for hours, and then for days after, on every network he could find, talking about how Charlie was the most stalwart, devoted Israel loyalist that the United States has ever produced. And that was a very strange development, but it was also a very propagandistic one to try and prevent people from remembering that even Charlie Kirk was having serious second thoughts about the whole Israel issue.
Well, he defended you. Really, at a moment where he did not need to say a word about that. You're traditionally a very famous man of the left. So it's not like he was not pandering to his own audience. Obviously, he was enraging his donors. They were already enraged with him. But there was just no reason for him to do that other than heartfelt conviction.
Principle.
Yeah. I felt that was one of the bravest things I have ever seen in American politics. It was basically ignored. But I just want to say that out loud, because that revealed who he was. Like, in a moment, you could just stay silent and just not say anything. He stopped and said, I just want to say, Glenn Greenwald, while we disagree on some things, we have different orientations, he is a good man. And this is a political hit on him. And that was about Israel. I mean, I think that's why that hit happened, is because of Israel. But whatever the cause, he did that. And that tells you everything about what he was thinking at the time and why he was so hated by the neocons. And to see them get up and be like, oh, here's my best friend. Okay. Not true.
Yeah. This topic for so long, Tucker, has relied on a climate of intimidation and bullying and coercion. And it's not just that you get criticized. I can show you hundreds of cases of people being fired before October 7th in the United States for stepping out of line in Israel, or losing funding, or all sorts of other ramifications. And most people if they're being, I guess, self-interested or pragmatic, maybe well advised to avoid it, because they just figure, oh, I have a lot of other issues and problems. I don't need this one. And the fact that Charlie not only was doing it with Israel before that happened with me, but on the day that it happened, stood up and so emphatically defended me and implied some of the problems or the causes that probably led to it. I remember seeing that, and I was really moved as well.
Oh, it made me emotional. I'm not even connected to it.
Yeah.
I just was friends with both of you.
That's right.
So do you think that, I mean, we're guessing now, but we're also extrapolating forward based on what we're seeing right now. Do you think that what's this conflict with Iran, which has revealed so much, and we pray it goes well, but if it continues to on its current course, does it kind of reorient the two parties? Does it shake up the system? People keep saying, no matter who you vote for, you get President Netanyahu, and there's some truth in that. I mean, let's stop lying. There's some truth in that. The big decisions are influenced, if not made, by a foreign leader. Does that end after this? And if so, how?
There have been presidential debates in the past 30 years, most recently probably, or vice presidential ones as well, where the two-party candidates, when it came to Israel, started arguing about who was more pro-Israel. That's typically the limits of the debate that we've been permitted to have. One of the things that I'm so amazed by, and maybe I'm being naive here, but it's very frustrating and shocking at the same time. The Iraq War was one of the worst debacles, probably the worst American debacle in our lifetime.
Yep.
Yeah, the 2008 financial crisis and all the other things. But that was what led to this whole unraveling of trust and faith in the integrity and reliability of American institutions that has caused so many things after that. But also just the what it did to that region itself. All the lies the credibility of the United States with those lies, everything that we were told would happen, none of it happened. It gave rise to ISIS. It was, everybody acknowledges it was one of the worst actions in American history. And yet here we are 20 years later. And the thing that has really amazed me was, to the extent there was any kind of attempt to have a debate about the Iran war to justify it, it was based on exactly the same tactics, the same script, the same rhetoric, the same jargon, the same twisted rationale, and often the same people.
Why waste another summer not loving your body?
With Base 44, we turned that question into a success.
Who sold the war in Iraq back in 2002 and 2003? I saw a Fox News clip. They excavated Condoleezza Rice from some underground lair or bunker or whatever in which she works these days. And they put her on, Brett Baer did, and she gave this 5-minute speech about how we have to go to war in Iran to make sure they don't have weapons of mass destruction and nuclear weapons, and they fund terrorist states and will bring freedom and democracy to exactly verbatim what she was saying. And the debate has almost been identical. So I want to say, yeah, if this war goes really bad, it'll create this gigantic realignment. And maybe it will, as part of, these events that led up into the Iran war, including the Israel stuff we were talking about, could create a realignment. But I don't know. I thought that we would never live through a very similar, if not identical, new war to the Iraq war. And yet here we are doing exactly that in ways that aren't even pretextually different. They're not even changing the script or the cast of characters.
Nope.
Literally. And I guess one of the lessons I learned from the Iraq war is that, the groundwork is always laid for big changes, and you sort of see it being built, but you don't really believe it's going to happen. I remember being at the White House right before the start, in February of 2003. And someone told me, yeah, we're about to invade Iraq. And of course, I'd been advocating for it shamefully, but I didn't really believe it was going to happen. Even though I was on the side of it, I thought that's too crazy. That can't actually, they had nothing to do with 9/11. So why are we doing this? And this person said, well, of course we're doing. I'm what do you think this is? And so with that lesson in mind, when the ship started steaming toward the Persian Gulf, I was like, it looks like we're going to have a war. To take that same principle and apply it to the IHRA effort, the effort to constrain free speech and to ban and to make illegal certain expressions of conscience and opinion. Do you feel like we're getting to a place where people are going to be arrested in the United States for their opinions.
The one thing we have is the First Amendment, which we should be very grateful for, because if it were time to create a constitution now, we would not have that. And one of the ways I know that is that, I'm very familiar with a lot of other countries, including one I live in, where that doesn't exist. The UK doesn't have it. Obviously, all throughout Europe doesn't have it. But it is already happening in other countries. There were two bands in the UK that did a concert, and one of them said, death to the IDF. Not death to Jews, not even death to Israel, death to the IDF, the military of Israel that was fighting a war. And another one sang a song about Hezbollah and Hamas. They were criminally charged with terrorism. The courts ultimately just in the last week threw it out. We just saw the woman being arrested in Australia. This is absolutely the trend in the West over the past. I think the galvanizing event was the dual traumas of Brexit and then Trump's victory in 2016 over Hillary that made Western elites think we cannot tolerate any longer free exchange of ideas on the internet, dissemination of news, and it's just too unpredictable, and it causes too many dangerous outcomes that are out of our control. But for sure, this is the trend in so many ways. And yeah, the West is abandoning very aggressively their belief in free speech, not as some absolutist, concept in the way that I might affirm it,
right,
but just the basic notion that you can't be punished by the state for the expression of political views.
I mean, that is the rule everywhere in the world. I don't know that there is a country in which free speech exists except the United States. And it's, as we've been talking about for an hour, it's definitely under attack. But despite the fact we have a First Amendment, we have a Fourth Amendment too, and it's routinely ignored. I've been the subject of, its violation, and you have too. So like amendments to the Constitution, the Bill of Rights is ignored routinely. Do you think it's possible that the First Amendment will be overridden by the state to punish people for having opinions the state doesn't like?
Again, this is going to sound probably naive, but this is actually what my immediate reaction to it is. If you go to law school, which of course every judge in the federal judiciary does and has done, and you study, the history of jurisprudence or whatever, the idea that the First Amendment is the kind of, crown jewel of American rights and constitutional liberties is so indoctrinated into your brain. And it is before that as well. Like one of the things we're taught is that the reason America is exceptional, the reason America is different is because we have the right to say things without being punished and other countries don't. This is something that's, inculcated in our culture for so long. So I'm sure there will come a day when judges will start to retreat from that. But for the moment, and you've seen some actually good cases where judges draw a line pretty rigorously. No, the state can't do this. The problem is that so much of the censorship now is through big tech companies, it's through online, and there are ways to circumvent it increasingly. And I do also think that
while everyone's debating whether AI will replace jobs, smart people are using it to build AI-assisted agencies.
If these Western liberal democracies start embracing a true aggressive form of a framework of censorship, you have political changes in the United States, and I could easily see them starting to find ways to circumvent it too. None of these things are permanent. None of them are guaranteed. You have rights that you think are guaranteed on a parchment, and I've seen it many times. So as everybody who studies history, it's gone the next month or the next year, even though none of the processes to get rid of it were invoked.
Right. That's right. Or, and you see this also in a lot of countries where the husk of the old system remains in place. The Roman Senate is still, gathering, but it's not a legislative body anymore. It's a symbolic body or whatever. Its existence is designed to bolster authoritarian power. It's not a counterbalance against authoritarian power. Like you see that. I mean, judges in Zimbabwe still wear wigs.
Yeah, and in the UK too. Let me just add one thing: is that even though I kind of gave a rosy-eyed, optimistic answer, but I warned in advance it might have been naive. when it comes time to war, all bets are off. And we've seen that in a lot of wars. In the middle of the war on terror, Newt Gingrich wrote this article saying it's time to repeal and limit the First Amendment. There have been all kinds of measures designed to, accepted by courts. I mean, you can go find it. It's online. It's like 2006, we're fighting for the American way of life and our rights and liberties. And he's like, repeal the First Amendment. But war is when things get really scary because people, all of war propaganda is so effective. If you look at it rationally, you can deconstruct it transparently, but you don't really react to war propaganda rationally. It's designed to trigger our most primal instincts of tribalism and, patriotism and getting bad guys and feeling noble. And when that happens, people do start to think that if you're criticizing the war a little bit too excessively, if you're questioning the real reasons for the war, that this is somehow not just a irresponsible or destructive opinion, but it starts to ease into sedition or treason. We've seen this a lot in many different American wars, and I do think there's kind of a sense of seeing that now. I mean, not so much that I can point to somebody convicted or charged with sedition, but there's a lot of sentiment going around, not just from random accounts, but in mainstream ones, that this needs to happen.
Well,
what is the reason for going to the war, in this war? Like, why are we in this conflict? First, it was nuclear material, and then after that, it was ballistic missiles, unconditional surrender, regime change. Our own government can't get the messaging correct on why we're doing this. And that's a problem. Because nobody in our government's on the same page at this point. And nobody in our government thinks for themselves. You either toe the party line or you're gone. Why Trump is trying to primary Massey. Because if it wasn't for real American patriots like Thomas Massey, we wouldn't have the Epstein files. So of course they want him gone. Because he did the right thing. And he stood on his morals and convictions. And God forbid somebody that has a soul is one of our politicians.
Well, as you said earlier, when things change is the moment at which lots of Americans die. And that's why 9/11 was the most profound thing to happen in our lifetimes, because 3,000 Americans died on camera. And it was just the worst thing still the worst thing I've ever seen. And I think every American felt that way. And so at that point, it gives the people in charge license to do things they would not be allowed to do, like create TSA or whatever, invade Iraq. And so are you concerned that, there could be attacks here in the United States, and what then?
I feel like there was already an attack in the United States, that Austin shooting, we haven't heard much about it, but it seemed pretty clearly linked to the Iran war. And if it goes on, I would be very, very surprised if there are others, which again, I think means that not only are we fighting a war for the benefit of citizens in another country, we're doing it by endangering the citizens of our own country for so many different reasons. And I do think if it gets to the point where this really gets out of hand and you start to see mass casualty attacks in the United States. The history of the United States and other countries leaves no doubt that emergency measures will be instantly imposed, and those emergency measures don't go anywhere when there are emergencies. That was the history of the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act was this radical, extremist, un-American law that we needed supposedly in the wake of 9/11. They assured us, oh, don't worry, it's going to be temporary. Here we are, 2026. It's part of our woodwork, and nobody ever talks about it anymore. That's how quickly these things can get normalized.
Man, I hope you never go off the air, because I hope this isn't our last conversation. Glenn Greenwald, thank you for all your time and your wisdom.
Keep up the great work, Tucker. Always great to see you.
Thanks, Glenn. See ya.
I'll tell you what, man. It's kind of scary. It's kind of scary. The way that this country is going. That none of the true issues that are going on here at home are being addressed. The affordability crisis is called a Democrat hoax. It's not a hoax that millions of Americans can barely afford to pay their rent, and that people aren't getting married and having kids not because they don't want to, but because they can't afford it. Between childcare and healthcare, you need to be making six figures, both of you, just to survive. And the average American is not making six figures. The average American is making nowhere near that. The average American is living paycheck to paycheck and can't afford a $1,000 car repair. And the disconnect between these politicians and the average American just seems like it's getting further and further. And they are so disconnected from reality because they are in such a class of society that is above where the average person is, that they just don't get it. They don't get the struggle, right? The average salary, the salary for a congressman or senator is $170,000 a year, and over 90% of them have net worths over $1 million into the millions. So when you have that kind of money, do you really care about the average American? Do you really care about how people can't afford childcare, or people aren't having kids because they can't afford them, or how our schools are falling apart, or how our infrastructure is falling apart? They don't care, because it doesn't affect them. If it affected them, they would do something about it. But the political and the elite class is so far gone from the average American like you or me, who has to go out and bust their ass for 50 hours a week. Like, I go out, I work in the middle of the, I go to work in the middle of the night. I don't want to have to do that to survive. I'm a slave to the system. And there's no way out. There is no way out. The American dream is dead. The American dream has become the American nightmare at this point. And it's crazy. It's crazy that I go to work and bust my ass 40 hours a week, and at the end of the week I could barely save $50. And I don't spend money. I don't go, like, I don't spend money on frivolous shit. I can't imagine what it's like to be a parent right now, trying to raise a family, trying to raise kids, trying to put food on the table, paying for health coverage for your kids. I wouldn't be able to handle the stress. I would fry. I wouldn't be able to do it. And to any parents that are doing that right now, I give you guys all the credit in the world, because I don't know how I would do it. And my brother's generation, my brother's 25, this is why people aren't getting married, and this is why people aren't having kids. It's not because people don't want to, it's because people can't afford it. It's because the average age of a first-time home buyer is 40 years old. That's insane. We need to fix the economy here in our country, and spending billions of dollars overseas in these foreign wars is not going to fix the economy crisis that we have here, that is propped up by the AI bubble. And when the AI bubble pops, it's bringing the whole market down with it. You have all these countries that are de-dollarizing, which is why the price of gold and silver is running up, because all these countries are getting away from the US dollar. You have the BRICS nations that are getting away from the US dollar. I mean, what happens when our dollar is not the reserve currency anymore? Well, at that point, we lose our status as the superpower of the world. Then what happens? Right? Then we don't have the leverage that we have to negotiate trade deals and all this other shit that we do, and try to orchestrate whatever the fuck we do. You know what I mean? We're losing that capability because the value of our currency means nothing. It's fake. It's fucking monopoly money. I'm gonna jump into this Jeffery Sachs and Glenn Diesen interview from earlier today. It's only a half hour long. Is that the first? Yeah, hold on. Let me see if this is let me see. Yeah, it's only 29 minutes long. But Jeffrey Sachs has a. I will always listen to him. He's always got great takes, and yeah. So we'll put this on and see where we go from here.
Discuss how the war in Iran may be spiraling out of control, but also how it's possible to put an end to it. So thank you very much for joining us again from Malaysia.
Great to be with you, Glenn, as always.
Malaysia.
So, Israel
You know why
has
he's in,
what is often referred to as
you know
the
why
Samson
Jeffrey
option.
Sachs
That
is in
is,
Malaysia right now? Because that is where economies are booming. Singapore, Malaysia, Vietnam, that whole Southern Asia market is blowing up right now. That's why he's in Malaysia. Because that's where the money is being made now. It's not being made here. That's for damn sure. Because we don't make anything here. What happened to bringing manufacturing back to the United States and bringing back all these jobs and onshoring all these jobs? It was all bullshit. The American farmer that is going bankrupt right now. We're about to have no farmers left in this country because they're under mountains and mountains of debt. And Trump's tariff trade wars has completely decimated what was left of the farming community. But people don't talk about this shit on the news. You don't hear about this stuff. Because this is the stuff that they don't want you to know about. They don't want you to realize that your country is falling apart from the inside. And the foundation that this country is built on is crumbling. And when it really starts to implode, there is no saving it. And we are well on our way there. And it is very, very scary to imagine what this country is going to look like in 10, 20, 30 years.
It's considered to be the last resort if Israel faces an existential threat, that is to use nuclear weapons against its enemies. So this is dangerous because the US and Israel seems to be exhausting their arsenals, including their interceptors, and the situation is not just deteriorating, but it's escalating very quickly. And I saw that the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, they reported that one of Trump's top advisors, David Sachs, warned that Israel could be destroyed, and under these conditions, Israel could use nuclear weapons against Iran. So I was wondering how you assess this, I guess, spiral of escalation and the possibility of this actually going, falling into a nuclear war.
Yes, David Sachs, no relation to me, by the way, but a friend, said a couple of days ago that Trump should declare victory and go home. And he was speaking essentially as a Trump advisor. He's the AI czar in the White House. So he advises on digital and AI policies. And he's an influential observer. He wasn't predicting a nuclear war, and he wasn't saying we're at that juncture. But what he was saying is, if this just continues, it will be awful. And he was saying to his boss, Donald Trump, just go home. That was the message. Just end this. This is a debacle, but call it a victory. Trump easily does that. But don't pursue this more. It's leading to worse and worse for the reasons that you said. On the economic side, the risk of global calamity is absolutely growing day by day, no matter how they try to talk calm to the markets, no matter how they talk about releasing emergency reserves from the strategic oil reserves. The fact of the matter is people can do arithmetic. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. The release of 400 million barrels of oil, which was what was announced, is roughly 20 days of normal flow through the Strait of Hormuz. Not very impressive, actually, for what looks like could be a deadly, long crisis and disaster, not only because the straits are closed, but because production of oil and gas is shutting down, and the physical facilities, one after another, are being destroyed right now in the tit-for-tat fire between the U.S. and Iran. And so this is why David Sachs advised his president, whom he serves, just stop and go home. Since Trump...
I'm pretty sure David Sachs and all of the Joint Chiefs advised Trump not to do this. I'm pretty sure that when we invaded Iraq and we went into Afghanistan and Libya and all those countries over there, Kuwait, we never went into Iran, right? Now, why didn't we go into Iran? Because we knew it was a fight that would cost thousands of American lives, billions and billions of dollars, and it was not winnable. It is not winnable. And bombing them into oblivion is not going to destroy the resolve of a country that in one form or another has been there for 5,000 years. Iran is where empires go to die. That is what Iran is. That Iran is the place where empires go to die. Which is why we have stayed out of Iran. But because this administration has been bought off and they are subservient to their donors, and their donors want to collect, now we're there. And now there's no strategy. There is no goal. We have we have no goals. First it was nuclear material, then it was ballistic missiles, then it was unconditional surrender, then it's regime change. The administration can't get the fucking story straight. So we don't even know why we're there. But we do, right? Because Marco Rubio has said it. Hegseth has said it. This is Israel's war. And we are fighting it for them. We are sending our loved ones, our friends, our kids to spill American blood for a foreign nation that believes this is the holy war to end all wars. It's fucking crazy.
Lives in a delusional world to begin with.
Okay, if you're still getting Slack messages asking, how do I do that thing again? I'm about to change your life.
He can declare victory. He can say how wonderful it is. Look at how many people we murdered. Look at how many leaders we killed. Look at how much infrastructure we destroyed. Remember, last summer he declared victory and went home. Of course, it was absurd then as well. But this is the option. What David Sachs was saying is that that is actually the best security for Israel as well. That's not only the right thing to do from the point of view of the world economy, the right thing to do from the point of view of U.S. security, but the thing that would keep Israel safest as well. In other words, this war is to nobody's advantage. It's a pure lose, lose, lose all around. Lose for Israel, lose for the United States, and lose for the rest of the world. And especially, of course, Iran and the Gulf countries.
Yeah, no, I've spoken a bit with David Sachs on email. I've been trying to get him on the program. He seems like a good guy, so
yeah.
But yeah, no, but I was thinking as well that if the U.S. actually escalates one step further and go after Karg Island and Iran retaliates against the energy installations across the Gulf states, it doesn't really matter anymore if the Strait of Hormuz is open, if everything is in flames and destroyed. And of course, it's going to take much more than 20 days. And I also thought the same by opening the strategic reserves. It doesn't communicate a lot of confidence either when one is willing to deplete it to such an extent. But you, with your colleague, you wrote, that is you and Sybil Ferris, you wrote about the 5 steps which Trump could take to put an end to this war. Essentially, off-ramp, which David Sachs advocated for. So if Trump reads it or calls you or listen to this podcast, what are these 5 steps you would advise?
Well, one is he's not going to call. Maybe David Sachs will read it.
If I could interject very quickly,
yes.
You at one point before he got elected, now he actually tweeted out a video of you when you were talking about the Middle East. So he, you know, I'm glad he listens to reason. But sorry for
yes,
yeah.
And that was a video that warned about Netanyahu. I said that is one dark person. I used a little bit less temperate language, but I said that this is one big problem. And Trump tweeted that out at the time, a mystery. But what I said turned out to be absolutely right, which is that not only is Netanyahu Mr. Genocide, but now he is putting the whole Middle East in flames. And the whole world is going to come very soon to understand Israel created our global economic crisis. It's not going to be good for Israel's security, this kind of approach. So yes, Mr. Trump did tweet that out. Maybe he can listen to somebody to tell him cut your losses, declare them a victory in your own way. That's your business. But don't drag us into disaster. This is the point. Now, what I and my colleague Sybil Ferris recommend is a real end to the conflict in the Middle East, because we say that there are interlocking parts.
I don't know how we get out of this conflict in the Middle East. I'm pretty sure we have dug our own grave with this one. We can't just pull out. Iran will continue to attack Israel. Iran will continue to attack the Gulf states. They're not going to stop. Trump's tried to get them to the negotiating table. They have told the administration to go fuck themselves. So what is the off-ramp here? For us, I'm not even talking about Israel. For us, what is the off-ramp here? We don't have one. We don't have one. And for anybody that's brainwashed from watching Fox News about how the war is going so well, that's a lie. That they're lying to you. The war's not going well. If it was going well, Israel wouldn't be on a media blackout. The war's not going well. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. It's been mined. 6 U.S. oil tankers have been struck by Iranian missiles. The war's not going well.
Probably won't happen. We stress that in the article. We're not naive optimists. We're just saying that the way you make peace is to recognize everybody's security interests. That is also the point about Ukraine. Since Russia's security interests are never recognized, there's no peace. The same in the Middle East. If you want peace, which most normal people in the world, I'd say all normal people in the world do, then you recognize everybody's security interests. What are Iran's security interests? Not to be bombed repeatedly by Israel and the United States, and not to have Netanyahu say for 30 years, overthrow that government. It's okay. It can't be more simple than that. The U.S. and Israel need to stop their brazen, blatant, illegal, armed aggression against Iran. This is not even a preemptive attack because Iran wasn't attacking anybody. This is just brazen, naked aggression. And it's the essence of the violation of international law. So that was point number one. Point number two, Trump says every day, I need to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon.
They have been getting a lot of leads today. We've been getting a ton of people to stop by. We're getting a great response.
So we're able to establish some really great leads. We've made great connections here at our Clover booth. The show has been such a success.
A lot of leads, a lot of great businesses.
I don't know whether this is fatuous, whether he's so ignorant he doesn't understand what he does, or whether it's a game. But the simple point is there was such an agreement. And you, Mr. Trump, ripped it up. Of course, that was the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action negotiated in 2015 between Iran and the permanent 5 members of the UN Security Council, not just the United States, but Russia and China, Britain, France, and the US, and Germany, and then ratified unanimously by the UN Security Council. And the essence of it was to underpin the supreme leader's religious command that Iran would not get a nuclear weapon because the supreme leader said this is against our faith. And so Iran put itself under scrupulous inspection and honored the agreement. It was the U.S. that ripped it up. Trump in 2018. I don't know if he remembers. The man on the surface remembers nothing, learns nothing, knows nothing. But I don't really know whether he remembers that he ripped up the agreement that accomplished exactly what he said. Maybe he can remember that the Iranians said again last year and this year they don't want a nuclear weapon. They want to have a negotiated agreement. They want to be under UN scrutiny. Maybe, I doubt it, but maybe he could find an aide to let him know what the Omani mediator said the day before they killed all the leadership, which was, we made great progress and we're going on to a next round of negotiations in Vienna because the Iranians don't want a nuclear weapon. And so this is the second point, is, yes, it's not even hard, Mr. Trump. It's never been the issue with Netanyahu. It's not about the nuclear weapons. It's about overthrowing the Iranian government. That has always been his dream. The third point is to open up the Strait of Hormuz. And that is not by Trump pitifully, pathetically demanding NATO do this, China do this, to get him out of the incredible mess that he and Netanyahu have created for the world. It's something for the Gulf Cooperation Council, that is the countries of the Arabian Peninsula, and Iran to work out bilaterally. And what is needed is for the Gulf countries to say that they are taking sovereignty of the military bases in their territory, and those bases will never be allowed to be used in aggression against Iran. So that's how to get the Strait of Hormuz opened up again. It's the Gulf countries on one side, it's Iran on the other, all Islamic nations, all part of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. In fact, both the United Arab Emirates and Iran are part of the BRICS countries. It's not even hard for them to agree with each other. The mistake that the Gulf countries made was to hand over their sovereignty to the United States as if that's some kind of protection for them. But what they should do now, seeing that there's no protection to having these bases, is to reassert sovereignty over the bases in their country and to agree with Iran. The strait will open and these bases will never be used against Iran. The fourth plank is the one that is the one that is so obvious, but the one that is actually the cause of all the wars of the last 30 years. And that is that Israel needs to return to its borders of the 4th of June, 1967, so that a state of Palestine is created in Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem on the internationally recognized borders. And this is what Israel has gone to war repeatedly to block. And this is the basic point of all of these wars, including this one. Why has Netanyahu dreamt for 40 years of overthrowing the Iranian regime? Why has Netanyahu been part of every war in the Middle East? Because his doctrine is that Israel will control all of Palestine, and with some of his zealot partners, even more part of Syria, part of Lebanon, part of who knows what, because according to the U.S. ambassador, Mike Huckabee, who's another part of this disaster, Israel has the right to all the land from the Nile to the Euphrates, says Ambassador Huckabee.
probably one of the dumbest statements that an American politician has ever made in an interview was when Mike Huckabee said, Israel has a biblical right to all the land between the Nile and the Euphrates. Well, I'm sure Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Jordan, Lebanon, I'm sure that those countries may have something to say about Israel taking their land because of a biblical mandate. I don't see them freely giving up that land. I could be wrong, but I don't think so.
Okay, well, the whole reason for all these wars, from the Israeli point of view, is they've said there will never be a state of Palestine. We'll kill them, we'll expel them, we'll rule over them in an apartheid state, but there will never be a state of Palestine. And any government in this region that backs the Palestinians, we will overthrow. That is the so-called clean break doctrine of Netanyahu that has been in place for 30 years. So the fourth plank is a state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel. And you know what? Israel has no veto over that. The reason it doesn't happen is the U.S. and the U.S. alone. This was voted in the Security Council last year and the year before. The U.S. blocks this. This is simple. People should understand. Almost every country in the world says, of course, there should be the state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel. But the U.S. uses its veto in the UN Security Council to block that. So that's the fourth plank. Enough of this. This is the most basic point. And Israel got insanely greedy or insanely zealous, depending on who exactly we're talking about, to say we get 100% of the land. You know what we're talking about for this Palestine right now? It's 22% of what was British mandatory Palestine. And Israel says, no, not even 22% for what is half the population. Not even 22%. We demand everything. That's why we're a nonstop war.
YouTube creators, if no one clicks your video, nothing else matters. Not your content, not your script, not your editing, because 0 clicks equals.
So that's the fourth point. And the fifth point is that with a state of Palestine established and welcomed into the United Nations as the 194th member state, Hamas, Hezbollah, and any other militant groups will be disarmed. They will disarm. And they will disarm because all of the region will insist that they disarm, and so will the UN Security Council. And that will be, and they will disarm because the state of Palestine will be created. And this is how to make peace. So what blocks this? What blocks this is a coalition of Israeli supremacism, of Israeli apartheid, of Israeli violence that goes back to Netanyahu and his party, the Likud, which in its founding charter in 1977 says that all the territory from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea will be Israeli sovereignty. That's why all of these wars across the region have raged, because that basic fact is against every standard of international law and decency, and countries have supported the Palestinian cause, and therefore Netanyahu and the United States have gone to war to overthrow those governments that have supported the Palestinian cause.
Wait, I like this 5-step, but also like your focus on indivisible security though, because I think this goes at the heart of what is required as well, because states, they compete for security, and weapons for one state is often security for one is insecurity for another. So you have two ways of producing security. Either you have indivisible security, where we elevate our common security. In other words, I don't point a gun at you to have more security for me. This is one indivisible security. Alternatively, one can pursue hegemonic peace. In this, you don't care about indivisible security. You have one dominate to such an extent no one can even dream of challenging it. I think this is this source of the Iran war, but it's also the Ukraine war. If we just accept that the hegemonic era is over, just as a matter of fact, the distribution of power has shifted, then we would have to essentially restore the principle of indivisible security. Otherwise, if one wants hegemonic peace again, like the 90s, one has to restore it. That means defeat Russia, defeat Iran, defeat China. And, I would read Israel's clean break into this, because, when it merged in 96, this is part of the hegemonic era. That is, abandon diplomacy and compromise, instead go for everything, because you're backed up with overwhelming military force. And
that is exactly right. And this is the delusion that such overwhelming force exists. It's immoral. That's another matter. But it turns out to be disastrous to hold such delusions. The United States held those delusions in Ukraine, because we should remember the Ukraine war started with the United States' attempt to assert its hegemony over Ukraine. Zbigniew Brzezinski spelled it out. It was the doctrine of the neocons. We're going to expand NATO anywhere we want, up to Russia's borders, surrounding Russia, in Georgia, in the South Caucasus, in Ukraine, around the Black Sea. That's our business. We are the superpower. Well, Russia had different thoughts about that. But that's where that war came from, because no one cared to listen to Russia's security concerns at all. And that's still true today. It's a blank wall to talk to any European leader that Russia has legitimate security concerns, okay? And now in the Middle East, it's exactly what you say. Netanyahu thought, well, I got the easy plan. I don't have to compromise on anything. We win because we have the United States. And there are famous clips of Netanyahu explaining to, I don't even know who he's talking to, we own the Senate, we own the Congress, we can get the United States to do what we want. The truth is, our crazy CIA and military as well have delusions. So they see Israel's hegemony in the Middle East is just fine because it's part of America's global hegemony. What's happening right now in part is Trump thinks, I'm going to corner every export of oil, Venezuela. I'm going to demand that Mexico behave itself. I'm going to take over the Americas, as he's explained. I'm going to take over the Middle East. I'm going to choke off Russian oil through sanctions. I'm going to decide who gets energy in this world. Well, this is a madman thought. It leads to global disaster, but it's exactly that hegemonic idea. I don't have to deal with anybody. We don't have to discuss with Iran. We just have to kill them. That's all. And that's what they think they're doing right now. And it not only is it murder, but it doesn't work to achieve your own security. Israel is at far graver risk than it's ever been because of this. And so is the United States at graver risk because our risk is nuclear war. And we keep pushing the world closer to nuclear war through these actions of not respecting
There's a new type of agency where AI handles most of the client fulfillment, and I want to show you exactly how it works. Let me explain how this works. You choose from proven...
Even in discussion, the security interests of the other side. It's the same in Taiwan. We say, we're going to send arms as we like to Taiwan. China says, excuse me, Taiwan is part of China. Do not send arms on your own. That, for us, is a red line. The United States, filled with the idiocy that it is, the recklessness that it is, says, we don't have to listen to them. It's our business. We are the United States of America. And by the way, it's Trump, but it's also the CIA. It's also the Congressional Armed Services Committees. It's also the arms contractors. It's also Silicon Valley. They all have this delusion of we don't have to take into account anyone else's concerns. And that's what's leading us to disaster.
This is our last question. How do you make sense of the way that Iran was underestimated? Because, you worked with a lot of state leaders around the world to see how they work, their strategic thinking, their considerations. How could it be that, we have the reports suggesting that Trump dismissed the likelihood of Iran closing the Strait of Hormuz, which should have been the most predictable thing. The attacks on the U.S. bases seems to be underestimated the weapons that Iran has at its disposal, or the belief that killing Khamenei would collapse the government and make people, pour into the streets with American flags, and essentially also now the assumption that the threats will make Iran capitulate, even though they see this in an existential fight. It's, I'm just wondering how they got this wrong. Is this just hubris, or is this a, disconnect with the intelligence community? I just, it's very, this I haven't seen this in previous wars. There have always been mistakes, but this seems to be something very, very different.
Well, remember the Iraq War, for example, how every single thing was wrong. Every prediction about the cakewalk that we were going to have, and how democracy was going to come, and so on. And there was an interesting interview in 2004. I think it was a Time magazine reporter, if I remember correctly, and a White House official, maybe Karl Rove, I'm not absolutely sure. But he was asked about, about the reality of the situation. And the response from the White House is, excuse me, we create our own reality. And this is part of the issue, which is...
they're delusional.
When you are so powerful and
Absolutely
arrogant,
delusional.
You just think we'll make it work. Trump didn't know what he was going to do after the first hour, but he said, we'll make it work. It's complete improvisation. Of course, the real lessons are that these are disasters. It said that it took 20 years for the United States to go from the Taliban regime in Afghanistan to the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. So that was a 20-year effort. And they credit Trump that it took 9 days to go from Khamenei to Khamenei. So this is American efficiency. In other words, we're not accomplishing anything. We're going around in circles, killing a lot of people, spending a lot of money. Maybe that's part of the point, because they want to spend a lot of money. That is profits for somebody and losses for all the rest of us. But I think the main point is we don't even have a process in the security state right now. The United States planning on anything has collapsed. We're just in improv mode. We have a psychologically unstable president. We have a constitutional process that is over because Congress does not use its constitutional, it rejects using its constitutional authority and responsibility. And I can tell you, in every area that I know of, there's no thinking going on. There are no reports, there are no studies, there's no careful scrutiny, there's no review. It's improvisation. It's flail.
This administration is flying by the seat of their pants. I don't think they've war-gamed any of this out. Because if they did, they would have realized that they would have been out of interceptor missiles within the first 10 days of the war. Now we're pulling interceptor missiles from our allies. We just sent 5,000 Marines over there in a mobile unit, which is basically a self-contained unit in itself, that functions autonomously without the need of intervention from bigger parts of our forces. They had their own self-contained little unit, and we sent these guys over there to try to open the Straits of Hormuz. Like, that's gonna go well. Everything that this administration has tried to do in this war has been a complete and utter failure.
Around. So frankly, none of this surprises me. We don't even have minimal processes of thought. We have a president who just makes up things as they go along, and you end up with everything fake. And then desperation. Oh, NATO has to come to our aid. Even China, which was the target of much of this, has to come to our aid. Where are our friends, says Donald Trump. My God, a 5-year-old would show more self-awareness and responsibility, frankly.
Yeah, and I'm thinking with all the religious advisor who comes to his office, he should have known that, you know, pride comes before the fall, or that God opposes arrogance. But he has different religious advisors, it seems. So, anyways, it's late over there in Kuala Lumpur. So thank you very much for taking the time. I was very much appreciate it.
We'll see you soon. Thanks.
Different religious advisors. It's like Trump thinks that he's God. That's the religious advice that he's getting. So, I'm going to call it a stream there. Guys, have a good night. I'll be back on tomorrow.
You have something in your home right now that could make you thousands of dollars and literally change your